Hey everybody, it's Durf, and welcome back to another episode of How to Make Mods for Scrap Mechanic. Today we've got something special for you guys. These Scrap Mechanic developers have released their official mod support. So that's what you're looking at here, this menu that says Select Mods. It'll look for all the mods that you have installed in your system, and then you can choose which ones you want to play with. There are mods already available on the Steam Workshop. You can go ahead and search for them and download them. But this video is not about that. This video is about creating your own mod, and today we're going to be looking at a new mod making tool that was also released by the Scrap Mechanic developers. But before we get into that, there's something that I have to show you guys first. Last tutorial video, Lesson 2, Lesson 2A and Lesson 2B, I asked you guys to send me in some of your own modded character skins, and I would showcase some of the ones that I liked in this lesson. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the stuff that you guys sent me. Okay, so this is one of the skins that was sent in to me, and this was made by Ray Droider. Very nice skin. And here we have another skin. Looks like this guy's been painting a little bit too much, and he's got paint all over his clothes. This skin was sent in to me by the Junker. Very cool. Oh, and look, you can even see it has ink on the shirt. And this skin is called the Lava Mechanic, and it was sent in to me by the Junker. Very, very cool. But that's enough of that. Let's get on with today's lesson and take a look at this new Scrap Mechanic mod tool. So, to get the Scrap Mechanic mod tool, all you gotta do is head over to your Steam library over here. Go into this menu and click on the Tools option. You're gonna see it right here, Tools. And you're gonna come to this page that has a lot of stuff. A lot of it's gonna say not installed, not installed, not installed. Keep scrolling down until you get the Scrap Mechanic mod tool. Right click on it. The first option will say install if you don't have it installed. Mine says play game because I have it installed. So just go ahead and click install and let it do its thing until it's done. When it's done, you'll be ready to use it. First thing you're going to see when you open up the Scrap Mechanic mod tool is this lovely screen. You don't have a lot going on this screen. You can close the window. You have two buttons. One of them closes the window, but we're going to be clicking the other one here where it says new mod. So for today's lesson, we're going to be learning how to make custom blocks. So I'm going to be naming this mod Block Template. Okay, so this is what you see when you first create a mod. You got your mods showing up on the list of mods right now on the left side here. You can go ahead and choose which ones you want to edit. So up here you got the name of your mod. Here there's going to be a screenshot or a thumbnail to show the world what your mod has to offer. And here is the description for your mod. This is what's going to show up on the Steam Workshop as the description. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out this description with something that makes sense. So now that I have my description all typed out, I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And you might notice the mod size updated a little bit. That's because the mod saved. So when you're ready to start creating your first mod, we're going to go ahead and click Open Folder. And that's going to give us this folder that it's the folder for the mod, and it looks like this. Okay, so in this folder we have 5 objects. There's 3 folders and 2 files. The preview.jpg file, that's the image that you see in the modding tool there. You can go ahead and replace this JPEG file with your own thumbnail to show the world what your mod's all about. Description.json, we can ignore this file. It's basically the information that we already filled out in the mod tool. So don't worry about this file, we can ignore it. The cache folder we can also ignore. We're not going to be doing anything with this folder today, so don't worry about it. Just ignore the cache folder. GUI folder. It stands for Graphic User Interface, and this folder is basically for all the stuff like you can put in some custom language options, you can set some custom icons, and also the description text and titles for all the stuff that's in your inventory in the game. And you hover your mouse over it, you can see the information of the part. That's what this folder is. That's what the GUI folder is, and we'll be doing that a little bit later on. First, we actually need to go into the objects folder to start creating our objects. So go ahead and go into the objects folder. Now you notice there's 3 more folders: database, mesh, and textures. Database is the folder that we need to set up all of our configuration files in. This is going to hold all of our JSON files, so the game knows which block is which and what they do. The mesh folder, this is the folder that we're going to be using when we're creating some custom objects in a future lesson. This folder is where we're going to stick all of our 3D models when we're making them. For now, we're not going to be making 3D models, we're just going to be working with basic blocks. So don't worry about the mesh folder for now. And of course, the textures folder is where we're going to store all of our texture files. So right now the texture folder is empty. The mesh folder is also empty. And inside the database folder, we have this shapesets folder. In the shapesets folder, the modding tool automatically creates 2 files, one called blocks.json and one called parts.json. Parts.json is where we're going to stick some custom parts with some fancy 3D models or something. We don't need to be worrying about this file. We can ignore parts.json. We're only going to be working with blocks.json for today. So let's go ahead and open blocks.json with your favorite text editing program. So this is what you see when you open the blocks.json file. We got an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. This defines the start and the end of the file. Next, you'll notice this block list in quotations. That's the game's way of knowing you intend to start a list of nothing but blocks. So in here we have these square brackets. Inside the square brackets, this is where we're going to put all of our blocks, in between these brackets here. So to make things a little bit easier for us to read, we're going to go ahead and put this into a new line and tab over to start our first block object. Alright, so to start off your block object, we're going to start by opening it up with some curly brackets and closing it with another curly bracket. This is going to be our entire block object from start to finish. Once we start our block object with the curly brackets, we need a few things in here to actually tell the game what our block is all about. In our first block object, we need to add a few properties. So blocks, they need a UUID, and this is how we define it. This is the property name, UUID, and the value will be right here. So once we've added the UUID property to our first block object, we need to give this UUID a value. So to do that, we're going to open up a new website, www.uuidgenerator.net/version4. And on this website, you can go ahead and copy whatever UUID it shows, because chances are that's not going to be the same as any other mod. Every time you refresh the page, it gives you a totally random one, so that's convenient. So you grab your UUID, get that out of there, and you paste into the value section. So there you have it. We gave our first block object a UUID. But this is not the only thing that the block needs. It actually needs some more stuff. So we're going to put a comma at the end of this line to indicate that this block object it has more than one property with its own values. So the next property that we're going to add to this block is called diff. And this is going to be the diff texture. So in here, this diff texture needs a value. The value that you put in here, we're going to start by saying $, and in all capitals, mod underscore data. So when you type mod data in your JSON files, mod data refers to your own mod's personal folder. If you were to type in game data, you could reference the game's data folder. If you were looking to snag one of the textures from the vanilla files, you could use game data to get to the game folder. But for now, we're going to be just doing mod data because that's our mods folder right here. That's what we want. That's what we're going to be using. So we're going to put mod data objects and textures because that's where we're going to store our textures. So mod data / objects / textures, and another /, and after this we're going to put our texture file. I'm going to be calling it block1 underscore diff dot png because I'm going to be using that file format. That texture image doesn't exist yet. We'll be creating it later on, but that's the value that I need to put for my diff texture. But as before, this isn't the only thing that this block needs. So let's go ahead and put a comma at the end of this line. And we're going to add a new property. And we're going to call that property ASG. Now the ASG texture, we've learned what diff textures were in a previous lesson. I think it was lesson 1. But ASG textures, I haven't actually gone through with you guys. So today we're going to be learning what ASG textures actually do. For the ASG texture value, we're going to put something very similar because I'm going to be creating the ASG texture later. So I'm going to copy the above line and paste it here. But instead of the block diff, we're going to create a texture called block1 underscore ASG dot png. And that's going to be our ASG texture. The next property that we're going to be adding is the NOR texture, which stands for normal map. That's the surface lighting that you see, like if something's bumpy or not. And for the normal map, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be referencing a folder called game data. Game data is just like the mod data folder, except it's actually the scrap mechanic data folder. The same folder that you've always been installing mods with before. That's what the game data represents. So for this normal map, we're going to go into game data, not objects, but just straight up textures, because there's a textures folder, data textures, and then we're going to reference this for our normal maps. Just to keep things simple, the game already provides a normal map texture right here in the data textures folder. So we're going to go game data, textures, and the file is called no_nor underscore nor dot png. No_nor underscore nor dot png. And just like that, we have the very, very basics of what a block is. It's a UUID and 3 textures: a diff texture, an ASG texture, and a normal map. But there's still a few more things that we need to add in here. So let's go ahead and add another comma at the end of this line and start our next property. This property you guys might be familiar with if you've seen the last mini tutorial. We're going to be adding a color property. And the color value can be any color code that you want. I showed you guys in that mini tutorial how you can get any color code that you want for whatever color you want. But for this I think I'm going to stick with the default Scrap Mechanic orange color code, which is DF7F00. And of course, we have another property after this. The next property we're going to be adding is called tiling. And the default value for tiling is 8. And that's what we're going to give this texture for now. I'll explain what tiling does though when we're making our first textures. And lastly, we need a property called physics material. And material has to be spelt with a capital M. Everything else lowercase, but the M has to be capitalized. If you don't get this right, the game will crash, and so just make sure you spell that correctly with the capital M there for material. And the value we're going to give this one, we're going to start with a value called plastic. So what physics material does is it changes the way that the block behaves. Like it'll sound different when you hit it, when you walk on it, when something crashes into it. And there will also be like a different kind of particle effect. We'll show exactly what physics material does when we have a working block. Since this is our last property of the block object from start to finish, we don't need a comma at the end here. If we put a comma at the end there, then the game will crash and not know what to do with the block, so make sure you only have commas in between your properties, not before and not after them. So that's it. That's literally all it takes to create a block in Scrap Mechanic, and this is the beginning of the JSON structure that we're going to be working with. So go ahead and save this file, blocks.json. We're going to close this, and oh, okay. So the modding tool just gave me an error. It says unable to locate texture, and that's because, like I said earlier, get rid of this. Like I said earlier, we don't have our textures in this folder here. So we're going to go ahead and create our textures right now. Okay, so to start, we're going to be creating a new image in GIMP, and we're going to make it 1024 by 1024. Important here, under the advanced options, we're going to fill it with transparency. Click OK. Here it is. And this is all we need, really. If you remember in lesson 1, anything that's transparent in a diff texture, that's going to be paintable. That's going to be... Okay, so here, let's look at our blocks again. The color property, if you remember in the mini tutorial that I did not too long ago, the color property is the default painting color, and that's what's going to show underneath the diff texture. So anything that's transparent in the diff texture, it's going to show this color, or whatever color we paint. So get out of here. So this blank image, we want our first block to be completely paintable. You'll be able to customize the texture in any way that you want, but we're going to start off with just a plain paintable block. So we're going to go ahead and click Export As, and you get your menu here. And you might have to search around for the correct folder. If you don't know where it is, it's in your user folder, app data. It's a hidden folder, so you might have to right click and show hidden files. You go to app data, roaming, Axolot Games, Scrap Mechanic, user, your user folder, mods, block template, or not block template, whatever mod you're creating. And then you go into objects and textures, and then that's where you save your textures. So if you remember, we were going to call our first texture block1_diff.png. So let's go ahead and save it as that. Paste. Export. We don't need anything checked here, so we're good to go. Export. Get out of here. And there you go. Our block diff texture is right there. There you go. It's right there in mod data. objects, textures, block1 underscore diff.png. And our modding tool is giving us another error. It's telling us that it can't locate the ASG texture. Okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and create it then. Okay, so for the ASG texture, we're also going to export just a blank transparent image. So we're just going to go export as block1 underscore asg.png, and we're going to export it. There you go. There's our two textures for our block. And close this, we don't need this anymore. Alright. So we have our textures created. So the game will look into this JSON file to create blocks, and it has a UUID, it has a diff texture, it has an ASG texture. It will look into the game files for the normal map for us. It has a color, it has a tiling value. I forgot to explain what tiling does, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So if we create an image the same size, you'll notice our tiling value is 8 in our JSON file, and our image here is 1024 by 1024. So this is what tiling does. If you go, let's see, configure grid. I'm doing this just to visualize for you guys what tiling does. And I show grid, here we go. Okay, so tiling in the game is for blocks every 128 by 128 pixels. That is the size of one block. So if I were to go like this and select this area, that's a 2 by 1 block section. So if you look at the tiling value 8 here, you'll notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 by 8 squares. There's 8 128 pixel squares in this image. If you change the tile value to 4, then you need a smaller texture file. And to do that, you just go here, go 512 by 512, resize, and there you go. You see 1, 2, 3, 4 128 pixel squares, 4 by 4. So this is a tiling, this texture has a tiling of 4. But the previous texture, 1024 by 1024, this has a tiling of 8. So the pattern of repetition that the texture has in-game can be different sizes depending on what tiling value you set and which texture you use. Okay, so now we can get rid of this. So the game has UUID, it has all the textures, it has a color, it has tiling, and it has physics material already set for it. Okay, so we're going to go into another folder in the block template, and we're going to go to GUI. In the GUI folder, in the graphic user interface folder, here we need some new files to create icons for our new block so that it appears in the game in our inventory. Lucky for us, the modding tool has a create icons button, but you can only use this create icons button after you've already created your block. Then the game has something to create the icon with. So make sure you create your blocks first before you try creating the icons for them, because you won't get anything without it. So when you click create icons, it will launch a new program. It's called Item Icon Generator. It's just a black window that pops up for a few seconds, or however long it takes to generate the icons, and then it closes again. And when it closes, these files are generated. iconmap.png, and you'll see this is my block with the color that I chose for it. It's just one icon because there's only one block in the mod for now. You don't need to be worrying about the icon map XML file. You're never going to need to edit it or anything, so these files are generated by the modding tool, and it's to help create icons for your mod. But we do need to go into language folder here, And here you'll see all the available languages by default anyway. Here you'll see all the available languages for Scrap Mechanic. If you go into them, there's nothing in it, but you can add something into it if you want to add additional language support for your mod. We're going to be doing just English for today. So in English, we have this file called inventorydescriptions.json. So in our blocks.json file, we defined what the block is, but the game doesn't actually know what the block is called, what its name is, and it doesn't know other things like the description of what the block is. So if you go into the game and you look at your inventory, you're not going to be able to tell what is what, and you're just going to see a bunch of garbled mess, and it's going to be confusing. So inventorydescriptions.json, that's the stuff that adds the text to your inventory. So we're going to go ahead and edit this file. As soon as you open it, you'll see this. It's very empty, and it tells you to look into the game data, GUI, language, English, and inventory item descriptions.json so that you can see how this file should be set up. But what I don't get is, I mean, the block list file was set up automatically by the modding tool, so I don't know why this inventory descriptions file couldn't be automatically set up by the modding tool as well. But that's okay. It's not too complicated. Just like any other JSON file, we're going to start it with a curly bracket. And we're also going to end it with a curly bracket here. This is going to be our entire JSON file for inventory descriptions. Okay, so the inventory descriptions JSON file, it's really simple to create. All you need is the UUIDs for the blocks and parts that you're going to be creating descriptions for. So, oh god, what's that? Okay, so we're going to copy that. And we're going to paste that as our new property. And for this property in the entire list, we need a value, but this value is going to be its own object. Just like this, it's going to be its own object with its own start and finish. So for the block with this UUID, we need two properties. One, title, not titler, title. There we go. And the value that we're going to give this one is, we're going to call it plain block. That's what you're going to see in your inventory. But remember, we need a second property for this, so we're going to put a comma. And the second property is going to be called description. And this is the smaller text that you see underneath the title in your inventory. You don't have to put anything for this. I'm going to leave mine empty. But you could put a little bit of detail if you want. If there's anything that the players need to know before using your parts and blocks and stuff, if there's anything that they need to know or anything that you want to put in there, that's where you can put it. So we're just going to go ahead and save this file because we're done with this. We have our description saved for our block. That's everything that it takes to create a block in Scrap Mechanic. So let's go ahead and minimize everything. Yes, even you, modding tool. And we're going to hop into Scrap Mechanic to take a look at our new mod. Alright, so once we're in the game, let's go ahead and create a new world, just for testing. And already we can see, oh right, the workshop mods that I have. I downloaded them from Steam. But already we can see a local mod, it doesn't have the Steam icon, with our default preview.jpg. This is our block template. We just created it. So let's go ahead in a flat world just so we can see a little bit better. And let's... There we go, lesson 3. That's what we're on, right? So let's go ahead into the game and see how our mod looks. Alright, opening up the inventory, we have, here it is, our plain block. And let's get our paint tool just to test it. Yeah, it works just like a plain block. So one last thing to test just before we go. Is this block paintable? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. You can paint this block, and that's because the diff texture was completely transparent. Let's first, though, create a floor that we can walk on. And I'm going to take out my hammer, and I'm going to ask you guys to pay attention to this sound. This, if you remember, we set the physics material to plastic. So I want you guys, here, let's put up the volume. Not too loud. I want you guys to listen closely. Right now we're walking on the dirt, the ground. And this block here was set with the physics material for plastic. So let's see how that sounds. Already you can hear a huge difference, but this is just for plastic. Let's go back for a second and take a look at the physics material. We already went through most of this stuff for a block, but let's take a look at physics material right now and see what other values there are. The different values that you can put in are grass, plastic, rock, wood, metal, glass, not to be confused with grass. This is glass, the thing that shatters, and steering. Steering is it's typically a thing that's used for like seats and stuff, but it sounds the exact same thing as metal, so you don't need to worry about steering for now. So there's grass, plastic, rock, wood, metal, and glass. Let's take a look in detail at what some of those sound like. So this is what plastic sounds like when it's hit with a hammer. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you know this already, but we're going to take a look at each physics material in detail to show you guys what it sounds like. Okay, so those are all the physics materials. We're going to be sticking with plastic for now for this one, but this isn't the end of the lesson because we still have to learn what ASG actually does. So we're going to go ahead and create a second block. I like the plastic block, but I want a new block. So to do that, we're just going to copy the entire structure of our first block, and we're going to use that as a template to work off from the second one. Don't forget to put a comma in between all of your blocks. You need a comma to separate each item, just like you have commas separating all the properties inside a block. You need a comma to separate all the blocks inside the block list. So, after you put a comma, we paste the entire information over again, so we have a duplicate. So for the new block, of course, we need a new UUID. So let's go ahead to the website and refresh the page to make sure we get a new one and grab a new one. Copy. There we go. And go ahead right here and paste in the new UUID. Just like that. Alright, so for the second block, we're going to be doing we're going to be doing something different. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I need files block2 underscore diff.png and block2 underscore ASG .png, because we're going to have new textures for this new block. Still the same normal map because it's going to be very flat. So for the color of this new block, I'm going to set the color to 2. I'm going to set the color to 2. To a lot of 2s. That's what I'm going to set it to. So this is going to give us a very dark gray default paint color. And I'm also going to set the tiling to a value of 2. So let's go ahead and save the file. And of course the mod tool is spitting errors at us that it can't find the textures. That's okay, we're going to go ahead and create them. So we're going to get out of this the language English, the GUI folder. We're going to get out of the GUI folder. We're going to go back into objects, textures, and we're going to create our block2 diff texture. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick.
12 seconds later.
Okay, so here I've got a texture for my new block. Can you guess what it's going to be? It's a metal texture. And in case you haven't noticed, this texture is only 256 by 256. It's not 1024 by 1024, and that's because I have a tiling value of 2. So if you remember what a tiling value of 2 will do, here, this is it. So each of these represent one block. A tiling value of 2 means that the entire texture repeats over a 2 by 2 section. And of course, this is just for the example. You can customize this in any way that you want. You can increase the tiling to 16 if you want. Depending on the texture that you're creating and you plan on using, you will set this to an appropriate value. You can set it as low as 1 if you really want to, but then you know, it's only one block that's repeating all over the place. So once you have created your diff texture, we're going to go ahead and save that. We're going to go ahead and save it as whatever name that you want to give it, but I'm going to name mine block2 underscore diff.png. Export. And we don't need anything checked, so there we go. And we're going to go ahead and close this because we don't need it anymore. I mean, if you want, go ahead and save .xcf as a working copy. If you ever want to come back and adjust your texture, go ahead and save a GIMP file for you to come back and edit it. But I don't need it, so I'm just going to discard the changes. And of course, the mod tool is complaining about the missing ASG now. So we're going to go ahead and create an ASG texture for that really high quality metal texture. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create our new ASG file. Since it's only a tiling of 2, we're going to need the size to be 256 by 256. And make sure to fill the background with transparency. Okay, so we're going to need a few layers, I think. And we're also going to need our original block2 diff texture. Let's bring that in there. Yeah, just like that. Okay, so we're going to need this because I want to use the colors in this picture. Well, you'll see what I need. Right now I'm just making it invisible because we don't need to deal with it. So we're going to choose any old layer, it doesn't really matter which one. We're going to bring up a color picker and we're going to choose a specific shade of color. Okay, so now what an ASG is. Okay, so an ASG, it stands for 3 things. But really an ASG file does 4 things. But we'll get into that. So ASG stands for 3 things: alpha, specular, and glowing. That's what ASG stands for. Alpha, specular, glow. The 4th thing that it does is reflection. So there's alpha, specular, glowing, and reflection. 4 things all crammed into one texture file. And this is how they do it. The red component in the color directly affects the alpha in ASG. So if it's 0 red in the color, then it's completely transparent. If it's 100% red, then it's completely opaque. You don't need to worry about this for now because blocks don't use the alpha channel. They don't use the red component in ASG. So you can ignore this for now, you can just leave it at 0. We will be using this later for future mods, but for now, just ignore it. We don't need to worry about the red component. The green component is for specular. This is the shiny stuff. If you remember our first block1_ASG texture, it was completely transparent. That means it had 0 red component, 0 green component, 0 blue component, and 0 reflection component as well. So that means the ASG and reflection were all set to 0, and that's what makes a plain block. For this second block, we actually want some green in the picture. The more green there is in the color, the more shiny something's going to be. The less green, the less shiny. So in general, I think for metal, we want something that's a little shiny, not too shiny, but we'll go with, we'll go with that value. And we're going to start with this color, just nothing but that sort of dark green, because we want our metal block to be a little bit shiny, but not too shiny. So let's bring up the this thing again, our diff texture. Now remember, ASG colors represent alpha, specular, and glowing. So the green is representing how shiny the texture is. This black and white that we see from the diff, that's not really doing anything good for us because the black is 0, 0, 0 for all 3, and the white is 100% for all 3. So I'm going to go ahead and paint something on this blank layer just to show you guys real quick the different colors. So we want a full green spot right here. We're going to paint it right in here. Just a nice spot. And we also, we'll turn that down all the way. And paint a black spot in the center right here. It's not really center, but we'll pretend it is. And then we want a blue spot. We'll do half blue, or we'll do a quarter blue first. Whatever a quarter blue is. And we'll put it just like a line, I guess, down here. And then we'll do full blue right above it. So, if you remember, ASG stands for alpha, specular, and glow. So the blue color is going to be glowing when we create our ASG texture. So for the metal letters, let's see if I can select all the white pixels and remove that real quick. There we go, remove that. And I want to put that on a new layer. So I have the white in its own layer, and I can turn that on and off whenever I like. I'm gonna keep the white where it is because I want the word metal to glow and also to shine and also to be opaque. But here's the thing: there's a fourth component to an ASG image. It's not just the RGB. It's not just the alpha, the specular, and the glow. There's a fourth component. The fourth component is reflection, and that's the stuff that you saw in the recent mod pack updates, like the chrome block and stuff like that. So reflection is done with the alpha channel. Okay, so yeah, if you look here, actually that's a lot better to visualize it. You see red. There's not a whole lot of red in the image. It's just the word metal shows because white has a red component to it. Green, you can see the very bright spot of green. It's lit up right there in the corner there. And blue, you can see the blue lines definitely show up. Oh, and obviously the green is a little bit lighter, and that's because the background is a little bit... It has a little green value in it. So this alpha channel, you see, it's completely white, and that's because the ASG texture we created is completely opaque. Okay, so to edit the reflection component, all we have to do is adjust the opacity for each of the layers that we want. So for the the entire metal block, let's actually, let's do something interesting. I'm going to duplicate this layer real quick, because the bottom, right here, I'm going to select a band underneath all of this stuff. Actually, select invert, so I select everything else in that layer, and I'm going to delete it. So the only thing in that layer is just a straight line of green that's going to be fully opaque. And you'll see with this fully opaque line, it's going to be fully reflective. So let's bring up the other layer underneath it for a sec. For this layer, we're going to set this down to, maybe, I don't know, it's metal. We'll put it like, we'll put it down to 25%. So it's a little bit reflective, but not too reflective. And we'll do the same for all of the other layers as well. 25% opacity. There you go. And this black section here, 25% opacity. And the white section, we don't want the white section to be reflective. We want it to be 25% opacity. Alright, so there we have our test ASG texture. Let's go ahead and export as and save as, not to block1 underscore ASG, but we're going to save it as block2 underscore ASG.png. Export. There we go. Let's get rid of GIMP. So now we have a diff and ASG texture for our second block. So let's go back into our JSON. We got our diff, our ASG, our color, our tiling. The physics material. We want to set the physics material to something a little more appropriate to what we're trying to do. So we're going to set that to metal. Let's go ahead and save that. And before we forget, I still have the, we're going to copy the UUID. I still have the inventory descriptions JSON file open in this text editor. If you closed it down, just go back into your GUI, your language, English, and then open up your descriptions. We want to add a comma at the end of this, because we have a new block to add a description for. Alright, so here we go, adding the title property. And the title of this block is going to be Fancy Metal, because that ASG texture does not get fancier than that. And the description, this time I'm going to show you guys a little bit of what you can do in the description. So in the description you can put a brief summary of what your block actually is. And if you do a \n, just like that, it counts as a line break. You start a new line. So I'm going to do 3 of them in a row, because I want to space my lines apart. And in this new line, I'm going to do, I'm just going to put a derp in there, because, you know, why not? A derp. So I'm also going to do another 2 lines down, and here's where it gets interesting, because if you put a hashtag like that, a number sign, if you put a hashtag and then 6 digits or a color code, which is the same thing as the color codes that you put for the default paint color, if you take one of those color codes and put it after a hashtag in the description, then anything that you type after that code, the color code that you put, will become colored text in the description for the block. And if you want to reset it, just go ahead and enter in a new code. Just like that. So this is going to be our description. Let's save the file and see how that looks. But before we do, we want to go ahead and update our icon map. So we're going to create icons. We're going to let the icon generator do its thing. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and test our updated mod. Alright, now that we're back in the game, let's go ahead and open our inventory and check it out. Okay, so here we go. We got our first plain block. It's already in our hotbar. And this is the metal block. You can see the text, the fancy metal. Oh, and look at the description right there. Our description showing up quite nicely. This is a fancy metal block. Derp, colored text. So let's go ahead and take that out. There's a plain block. And now let's take a look at our metal block. Alright, so immediately you'll notice the white is glowing pretty hard. And here, let's see, can we paint that? Oh, yeah, that was definitely a lot more noticeable. Here, let's take let's paint this red and see how it looks like. There you go. So if you remember, this horizontal bar in our ASG texture, that was a bar that was like 100% opaque. So that means that that section is 100% reflective. This is just like what the mirror block does. It's 100% reflection of... See, like if you look down, you see the brown color for the ground, and if you look up, you see the blue color for the sky. There you go. This first dot, that was green, I think. That was just really shiny. Okay, so to show you shininess, we need some lights. Yeah, there we go. You can see the shininess now. So the first dot, that's what we painted really, really green. And that's the specular channel, if you remember the shininess. So that green dot, you see, it's really reflecting that light. While the rest is not. This second dot here, if you remember, we painted that black on the ASG texture. So that means no shine, no glow, no reflection. Well, a little reflection because it was still a little bit visible, but here you can see like the green dot is really, really shiny. The background around the green dot is a little bit shiny. You can still see that the light has an effect on it, but this black section, it's like the plain block. And then these two lines, one was a little bit blue, and then the other was a lot blue. You can't really see it on this side because of the sun and because it's very dark. But on this side, when you paint the things red, you can see exactly how much each one of them is glowing. The more blue something is, the more it's gonna even have that glow effect. So the white text on the ASG, it's also glowing because white is a full value for everything. It's shiny, it's glowing, it's 100% opaque, it's reflective. That's what white is. White is just everything at max. So with this, you can create a combination of different transparencies, different shininess, different glowing materials, different reflective materials, and there's lots of possibilities for the different kinds of blocks that you could be making. Alright, so before we end the lesson, we're going to check out two more things. Three more things, actually. Three more things. Alright, here we are back into our modding tool screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the block list and we're going to create a third and final block. The easy way to do that is just copy from the comma straight down to here. Copy paste. There you go. Gotta make sure you have those commas in between your blocks. If you don't have them, your game's gonna crash and you're not gonna know what's going on, so make sure you have your commas in the right place. For our third and final block, of course, we need a new UUID. Let's go ahead and snag one of those real quick. And paste. For this last block, we're going to be doing, we're going to use block 1 diff, because block 1 diff was completely transparent, so we want this last block to also be completely transparent. I mean, completely paintable. Whatever we paint, that's the color that's going to be. But for the ASG, we're going to use a new ASG, block 3 underscore ASG. For the color, we're going to set a very light cyan color. And tiling, I'll just leave the default 8. I don't think it really matters. That's the same that we're using for block 1. Okay, so we'll just use 8. And for this physics material, we're going to make this sound like glass, because that's what we're going to be creating. But for this glass to work, we actually need to add a new property for this block. To do that, just create a new property called glass, and for the value, just put true. Doesn't have to be with quotations or anything, just put true. So with this extra property, glass true, that's going to tell the game that you want this block to act like glass does in the game. Glass is a special kind of block. That's it uses like a different way to render the blocks, so that's how you tell the game that you want to use that special way of rendering a block, so it looks like glass. And we're going to do one more thing before we get out of here. We want to add a new property to our first 2 blocks. This property, it's going to be something that you guys, you might not have seen it before, but once you see it, it's going to seem really obvious. This new property is called density. And the value we're going to put for this first block is 250. Make sure to put a comma. 250 is the density value for wood. And if we go down, we're going to copy the line just because we're super lazy. And stick it right here. And the density value for metal block, the default metal block that's in the game, that's 1,250. The density is how heavy a single block is. This is going to make more sense later on in a future lesson when we're talking about creating custom parts with a 3D model. But for now, all you need to know is that density is the weight of a single block. So for our first plain block made of plastic, we want to give it a very light weight, 250. This is just like the wood in the game. For our fancy metal block, we want to give it a density of 1,250. That's just like the metal block in the game. And our last block is just going to be glass. So we'll go ahead and save that. Of course, the modding tool is complaining about missing textures. That's okay though, we're going to create it. Thanks for the reminder. Let's go ahead and copy the UUID for the glass block and add it to our descriptions file. We cannot forget to do this, or else we're just going to get a mess in the inventory, and we're not going to know what the block is. Or we're not going to know what it's supposed to say anyway. So we start the description object. You know, let's just copy this, because copy paste, there we go. And we're going to call this mod glass, because it's basically what the mod glass is. So this is a glass block. That's what I'm going to put for the description. Oh, geez. This is a glass block. And we'll just get rid of the rest. Actually, we'll put this down a few lines. Just, you know, to be special. Alright, so once we save our descriptions and our block is ready to go, all we need left is the ASG texture. That's the only thing that we're missing right now. And of course, that's what the modding tool is complaining about. So, For this ASG texture, we need new 1024 because our tiling is set to 8. And we're going to set it to transparency. There we go. So this is what we're starting out with. Just like that. And we're going to go to... this is the ASG texture for glass, okay? So we're creating a glass, and in my mind, glass is not glowing, so we don't need any blue. But it is super, super shiny. So we need to put shine all the way up to the top. Very vibrant green. But we don't want it to be opaque like this, because the opacity says how much reflection there is. We want it to be shiny, but we don't want it to reflect too much about the world around it. So let's bring the opacity down to maybe we'll try maybe 25%, I guess. No, let's do it lower than that. We'll do 10%. And then we just go ahead and export as, because that's all we need. We need a really shiny glass texture, but we don't want it to reflect too much. And we're gonna save that as block3_ASG. Alright, so now we have all of our textures. So with our textures and our JSONs all ready to go, let's go ahead and update the icons. We let the icon generator do its thing. And when that's done, our mod is ready to go, ready to test. So let's go ahead and test the new additions that we just made. Alright, so here we are back into the game. And just to verify, we have the plain block, our new metal block, and a new glass. It looks pretty nice. And just to make sure, yes, it's paintable. You can paint it. Wow, that's a strong color. So yeah, it's that easy to create new blocks for Scrap Mechanic. Oh, before I forget, I gotta show you guys. We spent that time adding in the density setting for some of these blocks. So let's go ahead and test out exactly what these densities do. This is just the default resistance setting. We're setting it on 3. Glass, I think it was medium weight, so 6. There we go, now it's starting to compress. Let's move on to the metal, the heavy. Okay, 1 column is not doing it. There you go, 2. And it already started to compress. We'll do 3 just for good measure. And the last block, the plain plastic block, that was the lightweight. We'll put the entire thing there. And look at that, the entire thing. It's almost the same as metal block 16 by 16. We'll take off 2. There we go. So they're all about the same, except this is heavy, this is medium, and this is light. So that's what the density does. It changes the weight of the blocks. Don't go too crazy with it. So that's all for today's lesson. Man, that was a long one. If you liked the video, be sure to let me know by giving a great big ol' thumbs up. I hope you guys learned something new, and that it wasn't too confusing. If you have any questions about the stuff we covered in this lesson, leave a comment down below and I will try to answer them all. How to make mods, Lesson 4 will be coming soon, and we'll be covering how to create custom parts using 3D models. Tutorial videos like this one are made possible by my supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the production of more videos like this one, visit patreon.com/Durf. And if you just like my videos, be sure to visit youtube.com/Durf and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. See you all in the next video. Bye-bye!